The greatest questions I have are, my great spiritual pursuit has been to discover who's in charge. Is it a friendly universe? And is there a volume control for that still small voice within? And what I've discovered is all of that, who's in charge, what does it matter? Who's in charge? Is it a friendly universe? If you haven't figured that one out, do that immediately because it makes the biggest difference in your life. And the small, still voice, I can't control that. But at least now that I'm at this age, no one looks at me strange if I'm self-talking to myself affirmations. They just say, oh, yeah, nice little lady. Anyway. The talk that I plan to do today, when we get through the humor of it all, and I truly believe that the cosmic sound is not Om. It is ha 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 ha. And it's contagious. When we look around today in our world, we get kind of nervous. And I think one of the things that makes us very nervous is a sense of uncertainty and inconsistency, incongruency. Now, I was born with the mind that things have to add up. I don't know what it is, but 1 and 1 has to add up to 2 unless you're using a different numbering system. But things have to be congruent. If they're not congruent, my mind is just blown because I want to figure it out. I want to fix it. I want to reconcile it. Okay? And I know that there's things that we cannot reconcile, we can just live with. But something congruent allows me, to feel sane, which I question sometimes. Or not, I don't question that. It leaves us with a sense of chaos and disbelief. And what I believe is behind all of this for everyone, because I believe that as an individual, what we see in the world outpictures. We have the world at large, we have our individual worlds, we have our inner worlds. And what drives that is our values. Most people don't think about values. The first time I thought about values, I was in a corporation as a trainer, and we realized that something was amiss in our organization. And we couldn't figure out whether everyone was just passive-aggressive, which was kind of unusual, or what the problem was. And the problem was centered around that we hadn't checked what our values were as a group. And some of our values were in conflict. And if you're working with people or in a company where your values don't match, get out. Because it will never be successful. It will never be fun because of the gap in those values. Values are those strong beliefs, those deep beliefs that really govern everything we do. When we know what our values are, and we trust that we're going to stick to them, we can walk more confidently in the world. It's easier to make decisions. Now, how do we get these values? We're born with, some people say we're born with a blank slate, but I think what we're born with is this tremendous intellect that is like a sponge, just soaking it all in. And so we get these values by what we see, what we hear. And at some point, the outer voice that we hear of mom and dad, becomes our inner voice. And if you haven't done your healing work with your family of origin, you can change that inner voice because by realizing where it's coming from and discovering your own. Well, sometimes we get confused as kids because what we see and what we hear don't match. Again, that incongruency. And for children, especially very young age, they are learning whether or not they can trust the universe. I mean, that's the one thing they have to learn. And if they don't learn that, they learn they can't trust it. Can you imagine the difference? So we see mom crying. And we say, what's wrong, Mommy? She says, oh, I'm just fine. I'm just fine. We see Dad very upset and worried and pacing, and we say, what's the matter, Dad? He says, oh, nothing. I'm fine. I'm fine. I've discovered that the word fine for the most part, means that I'm feeling insecure, neurotic, emotional, and I don't want to talk about it. Just fine. I insist in my life on complete honesty. And it's something that it's not that you try at, you have to be, or it bites you really hard. And so, excuse me. Anyway, I just lost my train of thought. Welcome to the human race. Welcome to the spirit fills that says, not that direction, this direction, this direction. Anyway, we grow up, and as we grow, we begin to see more incongruent things. We watch television, and we're told certain things are good, certain things are bad, and we need those kind of things. You know, we need to have a sense of moral value. And it's not that we set the morals. That's the nature of spirit. And all of those 10 commandments that we follow and all of those values we have is spirit working. But what we do is we absorb the incongruency and we learn how to do it. I remember when I was 16 and I had this revelation. I was sitting with my family and they were all talking and laughing away and getting drunk, of course, because that's what they did. And at 16, I had this realization, I got it, that lying and exaggerating was the way to be with people. I remember that moment. And I realized that at that moment, what I didn't recognize is that because of this incongruency that surrounded me as I was this blank slate growing up, is that there was a part of me that feels split. I know I was born whole, perfect, and complete, and I've grown that way. I do have my senior moments, but I also have my teenage moments and my baby moments. Wow, wow, wow. But that split inside comes when the outside world doesn't match the inside world. And as babies, we know that life is filled with goodness, with joy, with beauty, with all the qualities of spirit, because we are so close to that transition from one dimension to the next. What this split does, though, is it teaches us to mask ourselves. In certain conditions, we show a certain personality. Now, I know we're like diamonds. We have very many aspects. You know, I'm a baker, and I'm also a pool player. You know, we have many aspects to ourselves. But at the core, you have to know that it's you. And that you shine through all of those facets of the diamond, like light. So what we learn, if we haven't really been taught and stayed with it, is that we have to develop our own values. You can't inherit them, just like God has no grandchildren. You cannot inherit God from your parents. You have to discover it. You can't inherit your values. You get them and then you test them. Anyone have teenagers or remember teenagers? You test everything and then you have your values. And you may not know that you have your values, but what you may see in your life is a lot of stress. Because when we are living according to our value system, which is our value system, your value system, and we have congruencies because we're all part of the same race. But when we are not living from that true self, with our true values, life is stressful. It's chaotic. I know for myself, whenever I find myself really stressed out, you know, my first response is one of you, what did I do wrong here? You know, I signed up for too much, or whatever I did wrong. But the real question is, what of my values did I set aside? In the 70s, there were lots of things going on in the 70s, and lots. How many were there in the 70s? How many remember the 70s? Anyway, one of the things that came up in the 70s, and you probably are familiar with this, is situational ethics. Remember the term situational ethics? Yeah, that was a new philosophy. And the idea behind situational ethics is that there's really no standard morals. That every situation has to be judged upon the situation, the condition. You know, the person, you have to take all of that into consideration to understand what to do. And the idea behind that is love. You know, you love the person. But situational ethics do not provide any sort of consistency. And they don't heal that split. And if some ways that people try to heal that split, that hole in the soul, is through addictions or compulsive obsessive behavior. And so situational ethics was just horrible. It set up the 80s, which set up the 90s, and you began to see how acceptable in our world lying became. You know, the ends justify the means. You know, a real lack of integrity. Integrity is fundamental to your authentic self. If you step out of your integrity, you're not going to feel good. You might even get sick. Because we always have to come back to who our true self is, which is a godling. And we know that there's only God and the activity of God. Now, this idea of situational ethics, I'm going to share a story with you just to give you an idea of what can happen based on out of love. A young woman was jilted by her lover, and she was in a state of great depression. A married man with whom she works decided to have an affair with her in order to comfort her. Seemed right for her. Some would argue that what he might well have done might have been a noble deed, for the man acted out of concern for his friend. What a perverted viewpoint. Here's the rest of the story. We can't predict the future. The man's wife learned of the adulterous adventure, could not cope with the trauma, and eventually committed suicide. One of his sons, disillusioned by the immorality of his father and the death of his mother, began a life of crime and drugs and was imprisoned for murder. Another son became a drunkard and was killed in an automobile accident that claimed the life of others, a mother and 2 children. Now, who will contend that the act of infidelity was a loving thing to do? In situational ethics, the big problem is you cannot predict the future. And you have no guiding light. If you're really stressing out, I don't know what decision to make. I don't know what to do. I don't know what decision to make. Step out of that confusion and say, okay, what is important to me? What do I stand for? How does this serve my values? Now, living your values, your core beliefs, determines your priorities. And if you want to know what your real priorities are, look where you spend your time and look where you spend your money. No matter what you think are your priorities, you have to be able to get real, because until you get real, you can't make a change if those priorities don't align with what you truly want. We're here to create, to be creative. We are co-creators with God, and no one is alike. So we are here to create this wonderful, authentic person. And in the garden of humanity, there is none other like you. And that is why, to go back to those core beliefs, those core values, and make sure that your actions match. If you get home from a day and you're really stressed out, say, what happened with my values or my boundaries? You know, there's a person who says, oh, I love my family, and my family means the most to me, but they spend all of their time at work. So, If you haven't lately checked your values, what's important to you, I encourage you to do that. A lot of the beliefs in science of mind are fundamental to some very, good values like compassion and gratitude and peace, loving, enthusiasm. I mean, there's lots of values, and find what's important to you. Check them. Reaffirm them. If there's a big question mark, then ask, what are my values? Spirit will show you. Now, common sense says that words without actions are nothing. They're just simply words. And so we make a lot of affirmations to support our values, but the important thing is the action that we take. God and the activity of God is all there is. You cannot separate spirit from the activity, the always creating, the always creating. And so when we don't take the action that is required, our world gets a little constipated because we've stopped the flow. When we are living with our values aligned with our actions, we feel good. We feel like the world is at peace. We have confidence in ourselves. We're not looking at, oh boy, procrastination. Have you ever heard the procrastinators chant? Later, later, later. I want. Wait. 5 more minutes. In the Christian teachings, we learn that faith without works is dead. In the Jewish tradition, they say, do not be a user of words, be a user in deeds. An African proverb is when deeds speak, words are nothing. What all this leads up to is that authentic self. Over the course of my life, I've seen the roles that I've played, the work that I've played, and when I first came into metaphysics, one of the things that stayed with me, and the very first is, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. It pisses you off, but it'll set you free first. And with that, I saw a picture of a woman wearing a mask. The mask shone to the world, and the mask shone inside. And what I discovered in spiritual maturity is that the freedom that the truth offers, facilitates, is taking off the mask so that we can see clearly into the world and the world can see clearly into us. How do we consistently align our values with our actions? Mindfulness. You have to be aware 24/7. I one time asked my teacher, doesn't God take a break? Isn't there a vacation? 24/7. Mindfulness. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It's simple. Being aware. There is no amount of guilt that is going to change the past. And there's no amount of anxiety that's going to change the future. And so, in this now, you can be mindful. If a situation arises that you're not sure of, wait. Be still and know. Be still. Wait upon the Lord. When I was asked to speak and given the topic, I kind of went, this will be good, this will be good. Because I always know that the topic becomes the laboratory of your life. So, yay, guess what I got to live with? And it's wonderful, clarifying our values. It made me feel so good to know that what I honestly stand for, and I wrote it down. This is who I am. No one can change that. And I feel really strong in my values. And then a very dear friend of mine asked me to do a favor that she really, really needed. But to me, it was fraud. could not participate. I've known this person for 40 years. And I guess sometime back there, I might have been able to go along to get along. Sometimes we should not go with the flow or flow with the go. You know, we have to take a stand. And so I'm thinking, because she's really laying it out there how much she needs this. But I knew that if I agreed, I would never be able to look her in the face again without the split. And with that split, I can't trust me, I can't trust her, because I'm out of alignment. So, in addition to mindfulness, resist temptation. And also commit to discover yourself and your values. So, let's just take a moment or two. And close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Remind yourself that you're safe, that this is a friendly universe, and that right now, in this moment, all of your needs are met. The chair is supporting you. The roof is over our heads, protecting us from the weather. We sit in a beautiful environment with loving souls. And as we pause, we reach deep inside to that spark of life that started it all within us, that grew our bodies, that heals our bodies, grows our world. And let's just, for a moment, remember how precious life is, how precious each creation is. And remind ourselves, we don't need God's blessing. We don't need God's forgiveness. The Father, Mother, God within delights in all that we do because we are its hands, its feet, its mouth, its being in this world. And we align ourselves with that truth right now. And we know in this alignment, we are whole, perfect, and complete. And we let go of struggle. We let go of confusion because we can know who and what we are, and we are free to express it. Beloved Holy Mother, beloved Father, we give thanks for our understanding, for our awareness, for the courage to live our life in the highest and best. And so it is. Namaste.